This is the fourth day of this March 1981 7-day session, and we will continue reading from and commenting on the sayings and dialogues of Bankei, as collected here in various issues of the Eastern Buddhist. A monk addressed Bankei. I was born with a short temper, which is always flaring up. My Buddhist teacher has done his best to help me, but without success. I realize myself it is not good, and I try to correct it. But it is something I was born with, so I have not been successful. What should I do to rid myself of this temper? With your teaching, I hope this time to cure myself. If I do, when I go back to my native place, I can stand before my master again, and it will prove a lifelong credit to me, besides. So please, give me your teaching. A real little motive there. Which is very significant. It's not just for no motive of one's own, but the pain it causes and the division it causes. There's an eye on credit. How can there be an eye on the anger? Bankei said, "You have a very interesting inheritance." Is this short temper here now? If so, bring it right out this instant, and I'll cure it for you. Which the footnote here says it's reminiscent of this dialogue between Bankei and the next patriarch there, Huiko or Eka. So I've been looking for this mind. I can't find it. It gives me no peace, torments me, doesn't let me rest. Please, please give this mind some rest. And Bodhidharma says, show it to me, bring it here, and I'll give it some rest. Eka says, I can't find it. It's nowhere. Bodhidharma says, there, I have put it to rest. Anger is a tricky thing, though. The monk said, I don't have a temper now. It appears suddenly when something irritates me. Bankei said, then you weren't born with it. You precipitated yourself on account of some chance cause. Such causes may arise, but still, where could the temper come from if you didn't generate it? You allow your temper to rise because you're partial to yourself and contend with others to establish your own ideas over theirs. And then you say that it's something you were born with. You show great lack of filial piety, indeed, in laying the blame on your parents. It's one of the dangers of psychoanalysis, to get a more and more gruesome picture of one's parents, of what all they did. What about their parents? And their parents and their parents? And yet it's a fact that we do inherit. There's inheritance. The brain is chock full of it. Bankei continues, at birth, each person receives a Buddha mind from his parents. It's his way of putting it. He always says that. And these words for Bankei come from this unborn Buddha mind. He isn't trying to advance a psychological theory or a biological one. It's just his way of putting it. He always puts it again and again in the same way. But for him it was always fresh and new. He never tired of it. And if when someone listened in that same spirit, then one didn't hear the same words, but one was one with that spirit of this unborn. Which always gropes for words to express itself, somehow or other intelligibly. He's born with not a single other thing. When one has a newborn baby, and one has clear eyes, which is very difficult, because the eyes always want to project already into a newborn baby. Remember just last fall being with our newborn grandson, 3 days old, and of course he had to have a bath every day. Poor soul. Not a real bath. He absolutely refused that. They didn't continue with that, but sponge him off and take everything off and then sponge him. Of course he cried. And Ralph said, he's mad. He's really mad. But he wasn't mad. It was cold. He was so cold he was blue in his face. But one could see anger in that too, and madness. So, after that, Jane would have him all covered up except for one little hand or arm, and she would just wash that. Then cover it up and wash the next thing. And he didn't cry. One observes with non-projecting eyes, and to watch these projections which want to come up. One must watch that in oneself. And in that, there may be no projections in seeing a baby. There is something of what Bankei says here. Crying, whimpering, drinking, sucking, kicking. It's all without a motive. There's no idea yet of anything. Just what it's needed. And when it is taken care of, then it sleeps like a baby. He's born with not a single other thing. Yet his illusions he produces by himself through his own one-sidedness. And in this, the small child is not alone, he's helped along by the images that his parents develop of him, of themselves, the demands, the teachers, the school. It builds up the idea of what one is, comparison to one's brothers and sisters, schoolmates, what one should be or ought to be. And one's refuges that one builds up out of fear of one's inadequacy, as compared to one's parents who seem to be able to do everything so well, have such power over one. They can pick one up and put one there. One doesn't want to be there, but they can just pick me up and put me there. incredible moments in children's lives when they're against their will are just picked up. All these stories about evil giants, or giants. Some of them are not so evil, but giants. Who have this power over one, and this longing, this yearning to be a giant oneself. One boy said, all I want to do is be 1 inch taller than my dad. He meant it. So the illusions are not produced by himself alone. That's a common job. Of the whole world, since time immemorial. Because everybody carries this in one. Is it not foolish to regard them as inherent? If he did not make them himself, wherever could they come from? If they weren't made someplace, and oneself does it too, where could they come from? It is the same with all these illusions. Unless he deludes himself, no delusions will appear. And that one can find out for oneself. One doesn't delude oneself. Where could delusions come from? One can see them in someone else. But does one have to participate in them? Often one does, just for longing to be with others. So one will participate in their delusions. This fear of standing alone. Bankei. People are mistaken on this point, and they create in themselves, through their own selfishness and deep-seated habits, that which is not inborn. This inborn, he's always referring to this undivided one mind. He calls it the unborn. It's a beautiful word. Nothing yet has arisen in it. It's not stained or pure, nor does it wax or wane. They create themselves, through their own selfishness and deep-seated habits, that which is not inborn, at the same time thinking that it is inborn. Because of this, they cannot help but be in delusion with regard to all things. Do they treasure their illusions so much they would rather live by them than by their own one Buddha mind? It's a fact, one treasures one's delusions. Everyone must also see into that. How one holds on to one's habits, even though they're painful, for fear of being without something to hold on to, something familiar, something habitual. Were they to know the one Buddha mind's great value, they would realize Buddhas are those who could not be deluded even if they wanted to be. That enlightenment consists in being free of illusions. There's no other way to become a Buddha. Come close, listen to what I say to you, and grasp it well. Your temper appears when someone does something you think is contrary to you. When things do not go according to your expectations, you're anxious to advance your own way of thinking. Because that's your refuge. That's you. That's your existence. You're totally identified with that. person attacking your views is attacking you. They're you. You're them. Why? Anxious to advance your way of thinking. You oppose the other person and kindle your temper all by yourself. You're a most unfilial son to complain of being vexed by an inherently short temper, and then to unreasonably accuse your parents of having presented it to you, which they did not. Were it really inborn, it would be present now. It is not present because it's not inborn. Your short temper is something you call on yourself from time to time, when the organs of your six senses are stimulated by external conditions, and you struggle to oppose them, wanting to affirm your own way because it is dear to you. Also sometimes not being able to affirm your own way. You're hemmed in on all sides. Can't yell at the boss, or else he'll fire you. So who are you going to yell at? Somebody who's not dangerous to you. Your husband or your wife or your child. Or the clerk in the store who ought to be courteous. She's bound to be courteous or else she'll be fired. If you were not partial to yourself, did not contend against things or give rise to opinions, then where could the temper come from? It could not appear. Our illusions are self-created. They derive from our attachment to self, which means our identification with the image we have of ourselves. Just recently witnessed in front of our neighborhood drugstore the coming into being of a fight between two well-dressed adult men. One of them had his Lincoln parked in front of the drugstore, and it's not allowed to park in front of the drugstore. There's a parking place. And the other one had his, I don't know what that car was. It was white. The other one was black. That was interesting. He wanted to park in that same place. He honked and honked and honked as the guy was coming out of the drugstore. He had a beautiful hat on, sort of an unusual hat, a little bit like a cowboy hat. Well-dressed man. Happens to be a neighbor of ours, a few houses up. And he couldn't stand this honking of this other guy. And the other guy couldn't stand his being parked there and not rushing into his car and pulling off. So he honked some more, and there were some gestures going on. I don't know all the symbols. But they must be very arousing. So the owner of the black car isn't quite in it yet. The owner of the white car is getting out. More gestures. More yelling. And the guy in the cowboy hat says, "Do you know who I am?" And my heart started pounding. I'd never seen anything like this except in a movie. And these people were dead serious, and I mean it. Talking of anger, there was rage. Nothing could stop them, and as I looked back through the doors of the drugstore into which I moved myself, all I could see is feet in the air and fists and a cowboy hat flying. And other people were upset too. This is not the kind of neighborhood in which things like this happen. Quotes. And someone called the police, and pretty soon you saw all of them in the little caged thing there in his car was red, revolving. They all derive from our attachment to self. This image of who I am. I can make a gesture to you, but you better not make one to me. This applies universally to all illusions, which arise without exception because of our fondness for ourselves, our total identification with it. When there's no such fondness, illusions do not appear. Because anger arises also from fear itself. Being afraid one has done something wrong. One knows one has done something wrong. And anger is a tremendous defense against facing this fear, facing this wrongdoing. Always away from looking at oneself. And it takes care of all that has been secreted and happening in this body. We have inherited a body, it's a fact, which is equipped to run away and to fight. The sign of the signal of danger. An enormous chain reaction of things happens in our body, making it ready to run. Or, if there's no way out, ready to fight. This body wasn't equipped with this, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have survived. Incredibly dangerous, difficult situations. 500,000 or 1,000,000 years ago, they put it farther and farther. Always new finds. Pretty soon we're going to be as old as the stars, which we are. So whereas in those early days the danger was an animal approaching or a forest fire, today all this mechanism responds to psychological, quote, dangers. What we see as something dangerous to our feeling for ourselves, to our image. Picking this one out because it's the easiest to observe and the most insipid, sticky thing, and the most relieving when it's seen through and drops away. So one is called a dago or something, and all of these things rise up. But the image is, I don't run away from you. I'm not going to get into my car and drive away. As the image of being a coward, the image of being a he-man. So one takes to fighting, and it's pleasurable. Because it takes care of this tremendous amount of stuff inside, which otherwise is experienced as queasiness, sickness, churning intestines, headache, heartache, tenseness in the body. Probably one reason why jogging is so popular. One can get rid of or use up so much that the body has built up during the day of sitting in an office, sometimes with 60 people. working under a boss who has no understanding for one at all, except ulcers himself, wanting to get ahead or something. A lot of these things these days are depicted in excellent movies. 2 of them, The Ordinary People. Another one, this French movie, Mon Oncle d'Amérique. Very interesting movie. Narrated by a brain psychologist. A lot of things being talked about here are shown in very artistic form on the screen. Very artistically put together. Very gripping. And not at all dreamy. It's not Dream Factory, it's real life. So, what is one to do as all this arises? What is one to do on the mat when one is angry with this stupid practice? I'm an idiot sitting here doing moo, moo, moo. All these rules. Monitor coming behind, clapping one. What is one to do with this? Can't lash out, although this has been done. One sesshin, somebody picked up a divider. I looked around. Even though it was the rule not to look around, I did that. Here was this guy with a divider. It's a good thing to pick up and smash. To say I shouldn't be angry, that's bad. That's away from the anger. To express it is no attention, and it's this pleasure of expressing. And yet all of this is there. Can this be attended to? Just as we talked yesterday about the hunger when there's no food. Or sexual drive when there's no partner. Can this be looked at, felt? All the way in its depth and superficiality, felt, experienced, seen, heard, in an attention in which there is no partiality. No judgment, no right and wrong. There's no right and wrong in this. If you think of that, you don't see what is going on. And it's only in this seeing which is together. That togetherness can come into being. At first it's togetherness with this anger without calling it that. Being that, one is that. One is it and one is not familiar with it, because either one expresses it and derives pleasure from it, or one is remorseful over it, one judges it, one thinks I shouldn't be, or else one represses it altogether. Which is not the end of the anger, but it's the beginning of disease. Because what has been repressed works underground. It's no small thing to muster this attention when anger has already flooded the mind. When the mind has already been in this state of attention, because one must find out how one lives. One is interested in this. Then anger being triggered is seen before it floods the mind, and it will not grow and flood to this extent. It will well up and melt much easier, but one isn't always that attentive. And also the triggers are of a different intensity. So, what is one to do after it has spilled all over? And talking about this attention, can this attention be there at any point? Of course it can, if it needs to be. If one needs to find this out, because this has plagued human beings since time immemorial. Not just plagued, but divided and destroyed and prevented loving relationship. One time, we were invited to stay with a couple, very fine couple, very amicable husband and wife, married for some 30-odd years. And at night we would play cards. It was their favorite game, and it's called Oh Hell. Because it's quite a game. If you win, that's fine, but if you begin to lose, you can pull other people with you. Make them lose too. In other words, you don't just have to bear the chagrin of losing, but you can have this joy of pulling other people with you. But anybody's allowed to say, oh hell, at this point. Well, this couple, even though very amicable, all the rest of the day during that, every evening, all hell broke loose. And at times, it was not just kidding. Really, there was anger there. Lots of things maybe which had been held down would come out. Wow. So, the next day, the woman, who happens to be a psychoanalyst and felt a little bit embarrassed, she said, I don't think you'll want to play with us anymore. I said, oh, it's all right. It's fine. It's interesting. She said, and then she would explain to me incredibly well how all this had happened, how this had come about. Very skillful and very observant of what had happened in herself and in her husband. And then it was mentioned, well, all this came afterwards. What at the moment of this anger? Is it possible to pay all of this attention right then and there, to look at it? And immediately the response was, no, I don't want to use my energies that way. And she meant it. If you don't want to use your energies that way, then don't. Then you go on with that. And you explain. And you may make resolutions. And you may repent. But unless it is seen at the instant, which is a tremendous thing, takes all of you. It's really a fire of energy and awareness. Unless that happens at that instant, a seed is planted, a trace is left for the next time. It can only be erased, dissolved, burnt in this fire of attention. which is no mind, which is no partiality, no fondness for self. Listen carefully, says Bankei. Your parents gave you Buddha mind when you were born, nothing else. From the time you were a tiny child, you have watched and listened to people in their fits of ill temper, and you've learned from them and imitated them, until irascibility has become a part of your own disposition, too. Now from time to time you arouse your temper. If now you realize your past folly and henceforth do not allow your temper to arise, and this not allowing for Bankei means remaining in this Buddha mind of unbornness, of attention, of no partiality. If one is in that, how can anything trigger anything? There's nothing to trigger. One sees the other person as an angry or frustrated or whatever. One sees that person as understanding. And with that, there may be love and compassion, with no intent to be loving and compassionate. It's there. If you do not allow your temper to arise, then you will have no temper to cure. A more direct way than trying to correct it would be not to produce it in the first place. That's what we've just been talking about. To try to correct it after it has appeared involves a great deal of effort. There's no need to rid yourself of it if it is not produced to begin with. So bear this deeply in mind. But not to make an ideal of this, because then there will be frustration and additional arousal of this body and anger when one has not conformed to the ideal of not being angry. That'll make one angry. Just to be as one is and to be with it without judgment. It needs to be said over and over again because we're absolutely drilled in this judging, in this condemning, or in this condoning or justifying, rationalizing, and never with the thing itself, giving it a chance to see what it is. Being it because we are that at that instant. That we shouldn't be that is an afterthought, an after division, a division after the fact. If you grasp this securely, says Bankei, and apply it to the matter of your temper, you will find that you cannot be deluded by any other thing as well. That is so. If it can be done with anger, if this attention is there, then it is also there with jealousy, with envy, with ambition. It's there whenever this body-mind is aroused. If one needs to find out what this is all about, to be intimate with it, on totally familiar footing. And then one will also avoid this enormous pitfall of projecting what one will not see in oneself onto other people. Because this is our easy way of dealing with things, to project it onto other people and then try to help them. help anybody with anything that you have not faced completely in yourself. When you face something completely in yourself, you're helping other people. Then you will dwell in the unborn Buddha mind. And for you there will be nothing else. Because it's easily enough said for a Zen monk living the way Bankei did. In relationship with people who came to him, to listen to him, to learn from him. Because we know very little, we never hear about any other relationships of Zen masters. Usually by the time it's a master, there's nobody telling one what to do, nobody above. And the monks have a way of, whatever the master says, all right. There's no contention. So masters often don't have to contend. I would never say then you will always dwell in the Buddha mind. Don't make any statements like that. You don't know. Find out if you always dwell in the Buddha mind. And if you're not dwell there, where are you dwelling? And if you don't know what this means, don't you have to find out what this unborn is? In which there is no contention, no conflict. Live and work this very day by the unborn Buddha mind, and all things will be found in harmony. Is not this the priceless thing that is directly pointed at? This is in quotation marks, and the footnote says, there's an allusion to the Zen saying, which is attributed to Bodhidharma, a special transmission outside the scriptures, not based on words or letters, seeing directly into one's true mind or into the truth of oneself, directly becoming a Buddha, although there's no becoming. Becoming is an idea, it's a projection into the future, which is thinking. Or thinking backward. I'm different today than I was yesterday. I want all of you to listen to my words as if you were today reborn and renewed. If your minds hold any preconceptions, they will not admit what others have to say. If one has preconceptions, one cannot listen. Preconceptions get in the way. So if you listen now as if you were born anew, you will hear my words as if for the first time. For the very first time, he says. And as you will thus be without preconceptions, you will take and understand fully every word as I speak it. With that, the Dharma is fully achieved. We'll stop here for today. The four vows.
All beings without number.
I vow to liberate endless blind passions. I vow to uproot Dharma gaze beyond measure. I vow to penetrate the great way of a Buddha. I vow to attain all beings without number. I vow to liberate endless blind passions. I vow to uproot Dharma gates beyond measure. I vow to penetrate the great way of a Buddha. I vow to attain all beings without number. I vow to liberate endless blind passions. I vow to uproot Dharma gaze beyond measure. I vow to penetrate the great way of a Buddha. I vow to attain